So our reading today from Psalm 62, 5 through 8. Oh, I must find rest in God only, because my hope comes from him. Only God is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I will not be shaken. My deliverance and glory depend on God. God is my strong rock. My refuge is in God. All you people, trust in him at all times. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our refuge. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Well, we continue our sermon series that we started last week called A Holy Waste of Time. And the more and more that I think about it, the more and more I'm confident I'll never name another sermon series this well. I've peaked early. I love this. A holy waste of time. Love that. And I hate it all at the same time because we're bad at it. And that's kind of what we talked about last week, is being bad about wasting time. About allowing ourselves to simply rest, to be in the presence of God. But I have to tell you, a little birdie told me last week that at the ice cream parlor, after church on Sunday, found a lot of you wasting time in there. Good. That's a very proud pastor moment for me. People came into the ice cream parlor and said they were wasting time here. Oh, yes. It's awesome. Keep it up. Because today we're going to continue on our journey of Sabbath. And finding out how and where and what happens when we don't have a holy waste of time with God. This week we keep exploring by stopping the world, or at least slowing it down just enough to get off of it for a minute. But the funny thing about slowing or stopping the world, there's the reality of it, is it's going to keep going. It's going to keep spinning, whether we're on it or not. And it's fair to say that that causes us a lot of anxiety, or we wouldn't have a hard time wasting time. It causes us anxiety because when we step off and rest for a moment, the world keeps turning, and we are afraid that we might miss something, that something might pass us by. But that's the reality of Sabbath, of rest, is knowing that yes, the world is in fact going to keep going while we rest, while we step off for a minute. But we have to allow ourselves to step off and find rest. The trick is we have to trust. We have to trust in something other than ourselves and this world and anything else in it that does not cause us to rest. And so today we focus on Psalm 62. It's this poetic response to this very thing, to finding rest and finding rest in God. To find rest in a world that keeps turning even when we step off of it for a minute. And so in this poem, in this psalm, the poet cries out in trust and hope of God. Here's Psalm 62, verses 1 and 2. Truly my soul finds rest in God. My salvation comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. See, church, when we slow the world down enough to stop and hop off, do we find ourselves truly resting? Or are we still thinking about work and responsibilities? Do we allow our minds, our bodies, and our souls to rest from that, from our day-to-day responsibilities, so that when we jump back into the world, we're renewed and ready to go? Chances are, speaking from experience, we don't allow ourselves to do that. We may allow ourselves to slow down, but we're still connected to work and to home and to our day-to-day things. And so when we jump back on, we're just as tired as we were when we stepped away. It's no secret that we live in a culture that thrives on busyness. We like to be busy. It's part of it. It's no secret that we continue to live in this permanent state of busyness and exhaustion that eventually leads to burnout. So to avoid burnout, to avoid burning out, we have to find ways to rest. We have to allow ourselves to slow the world down just a little bit so we can get off and Sabbath, to rest, to have this holy waste of time. Here's Psalm 62, verses 5 and 6. Oh, I must find rest in God only, because my hope comes from him. Only God is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I will not be shaken. This Sabbath that we talk about is all about rest. It's about a holy waste of time. Finding ways in which we find God in this world and we allow ourselves to rest in God's presence. And the psalmist here writes, I must find rest in God. See, the writer is on the verge of burnout. Given all that I have to give and all that I have, I must find rest. For my mind, my body, and my soul are empty. What an honest confession of I am tired. I need rest. When we don't make that honest confession, we lean towards burnout. It's hard to avoid. As people, we can only do so much before our tanks hit E, till they get empty. I mean, we don't jump in our cars to go anywhere without looking at the gas tank first, do we? But yet, as people, we often check our own. Rest is the fuel source to resist burning out. It's to restore our souls and to renew our minds and our bodies for the work that God is calling us to. Here's Psalm 62, verses 7 and 8 again. My deliverance and glory depend on God. God is my strong rock. My refuge is in God. All you people, trust in him all the times. Pour out your hearts before him. God is our refuge. And so this Sabbath, this rest, this time that we are to take to renew our souls, our minds, and our bodies. If we are constantly on the verge of burnout and we're depending on everything else but God, we're going to be running on empty. And when we run on empty, there's nothing else for us to pour out, and we eventually become so emotionally and spiritually and physically empty that we just collapse. We have nothing else to give, and yet we still try to give. So I brought props today, because sometimes I learn a little better visually. We might make a mess. We'll see. So just think for a moment. This is God. And this is us and our friends and our family and our church and our community. And when we find rest, when we allow ourselves to Sabbath, God pours into us. Oh, we're doing good. And then when we jump back onto the world, we go and we pour out into our community and into our family, into our friends, and into our church. And then hopefully we know that, we've run empty, and so we come back to God, wherever we find God, and we fill back up. So that we can then go back out and pour out into our friends and family, into our kids, into our community, and into our church. But the thing that we run into trouble with is when we pour out all that we can pour out and drip everywhere we can drip, we run dry. And yet we still keep trying to pour into all of these places and all of these people. but we're dry. All the while, God is still calling us back to pour into us. But we're not allowing ourselves to rest, to Sabbath, to renew our souls. And yet God is still calling us. God is still pouring. And we are still on dry because we will not allow ourselves a moment to stop and rest. And we burn out. We find ourselves asking, God, where are you? And God's saying, I'm right here, pouring into you. Just rest. And we still look around. But church, there's hope and a mess. There's hope because God will keep pouring, keep calling us to come back and to renew our souls. And we hear it from our friends and our family and our church and our community. Go find rest. We hear God's voice and feel God's presence in all of these places. And there's hope that when we're turned over and we are dry, that God is still calling. And that when we come back, God continues to pour in and pour in and pour in and pour in. So that we can then go and pour out. Oop, I missed. Oop, I'm going to keep doing that. And pour out and pour out. Church, this is Sabbath. This is what rest looks like. And a turned over cup. It was bigger, I didn't make a mess. That's what burnout looks like. We want to pour out and pour out, but there's nothing to pour, and our cup is turned over so that we can't pour in. That's what it looks like when we don't Sabbath. When we don't allow ourselves to slow this world down enough to simply get off and rest. And so, church, we burn out and we're tired, wondering where God is in all of this. The psalmist hits the nail on the head. Says it perfectly. Rest comes from trust. And trust comes from allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Ooh, that word. We do not like to be vulnerable. But we have to. We have to be vulnerable enough to step off this world and let it keep going so that we can rest. And we have to be okay with that. Church, that's okay. To rest. And so maybe the question we should be asking ourselves is that good old Wesleyan question. How is it with your soul? And not only do we have to ask that question, we have to answer it. And we have to answer it honestly. And if our answer is, how is it with your soul? And our answer is, it's tired. It's weary. It's beaten up. It's broken. It's empty. If that's our true and honest answer, we got to come back here. We're burned out and we're tired and we have to flip our cup back over so God can pour into us. If your answer to that question is anything but my soul is refreshed and renewed and ready to go, you need rest. It's God calling you back. Come and rest in my presence. Each of us renews our soul in a different way. Found that out last week. Many of you like ice cream. It's good. Ice cream restores my soul as well. Find those moments where you can find God in your presence. It's different for all of us. But church, what we have to do is quit leaving our cups like this. We have to allow ourselves to slow down enough, flip it over, and let God pour into us so that we can go out and pour that same love and grace into the world. Church, there is always, always hope. A hope that we find in Sabbath rest, that God fills us up, renews our minds, our bodies, and our souls. Find that holy waste of time. Please. For you, for your soul, for your mind, and for your body. Find that place where God pours in to you. Go and waste some time today, tomorrow, and the next day. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, we pray. Amen.